Now moving to to students, I guess, what is specific to start with, what a specific skill do you think is the most relevant for researchers in your field at the moment, especially with the rise of AI stuff and large language models and all of that happening around. So if you think about the skills you try to teach your students at the moment, what would what kind of skills do you think are the most relevant?
Well, one of the things that people need to learn is, of course, technical skills of whatever their chosen topic is, how to invert these matrices, or how to build the circuit, or whatever. There's just a lot of technical skills. I think one thing we do in CCAP that I think is pretty important is we try to give a lot of mentorship on career skills so that people can hone their ambitions and then realize their ambitions. Let me give an example that, when I check archive every day, there's something like 100 papers I could potentially be interested in. I check, the astro, nuclear, and particle one. So that's a lot of papers. There's 100 papers a day. Nobody can really read 100 papers a day. So, part of the career skills is learning how to make your papers stand out. So, if you write an important paper and nobody notices it because it just got washed in with everything else and they just didn't see it, you missed an opportunity. And so you want to think about ways to make your work be better known. One way to do that is to, before you put a paper on archive, think about some of the world experts in that area and think about some of the papers that you use the most. This is before the paper goes on archive. Send an individual letter, email, to some of those people saying, I really appreciated your work on these topics, maybe specifically these papers. That was foundational to helping my understanding to be able to carry out the work I'm doing now. We've finished a paper that we think you might be interested in. If you have time to take a look and give us comments in the next, 2 weeks, that would be greatly appreciated. And please don't share the paper with anybody else, but we welcome suggestions of other people we should send the paper to. A couple of important things just happened there. If you're a student and this is your paper, first of all, you got introduced to some important people in your field and vice versa. Second of all, people are very generous with their time, and we have a very high success rate of getting very thoughtful replies from people. And we use these to improve the papers before they become public or before they go to the journal. That's a great learning experience for the lead author. Typically a student or a postdoc is the lead author. So they get to know people in their field and vice versa. They get feedback on their paper that makes it stronger before it goes to referees, etc. So that's an example of a career skill. And by the way, lots of people send me lots of papers just like that. And I always send comments. Almost always. Can't promise everybody. Almost always. So, that's an example of career skills. So you need technical skills, but you also need the career skills to be able to stand out just because there's such a big field. And then there's a third aspect which you can't really teach, but you can amplify. And that's personal characteristics. So some of the things that I look for in collaborators are curiosity. So now I'm speaking for myself. I look for curiosity and I look for conscientiousness, meaning like people who know what they don't know. People who are careful about, like, let me make up an example from the world of parenting. You ask your kid, did you do your homework? Yeah, I worked on it for an hour. The question is, did you finish your homework? Well, no, I worked on it for an hour. It's like, yeah, but did you finish it? And the difference between, yeah, I did some stuff, I did the amount I wanted to do, versus I finished it and I feel proud of it. That difference is conscientiousness and caring about details and caring about getting something right and knowing that, you know, taking pride in your work and feeling like your reputation depends upon delivering correct things, correct and complete things again and again and again. It's totally fine if you don't know something, but you have to say, this is the part I don't know. So you might say that we've calculated this process with tree-level Feynman diagrams and we think it's accurate to whatever, let me say fake 1%. Could there be loop corrections that affected at smaller level? Yes, we're not calculating them here, but we know they exist, but we're saying we calculated this to X%. And so we know what we know and we know what we don't know. And so I look for people who are, you know, curious and excited and ambitious, but also who care about getting things right.
I see that.
And they did take pride in their work and just, if they don't understand something, they're going to chase it down until they do because they want to get it right. So amplifying people's personal trait, you can't make somebody conscientious, you can't make somebody curious, but you can select who you work with and you can help amplify people's strengths. And so that's an important part of what I look for.
There is always like a time limit in terms of like publishing. So like how do you approach like the balancing the quality of research versus like the pressure to publish?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm going to quote great Bohdan Paczynski, who was an astronomer, who said, a paper is about one thing. He was the advisor of my friend and colleague in astronomy, Chris Stanek, and he learned that very well from Bohdan. A paper is about one thing. And so, you know, a paper should be, you should have that one thing, but basically the idea is, if you put 2 or 3 major things in a paper, people will only remember one of them. And so those should be separate papers. It doesn't mean that papers should be minimal publishable units. It just means don't confuse the audience by putting too many things in the basket. And I prefer to keep papers more short and more focused so that everybody remembers what they were about. Something else I wanted to say there. You know, the number of papers is important, but it's also important the degree of, since we're talking about grad students right now, the degree of leadership that they take on a paper. And so, you know, if the grad student is one of N authors on N papers, that's one thing. But if it's a smaller number of papers, but they led them, you know, they did the research, they figured out the ideas, and they did most of the writing, that's a different story. Because what that means is, it's obviously that's harder, right? And so, you know, when I write a letter of reference for people to try to get a postdoc or whatever other job, I can talk about the things that they've done, because that's the job of a postdoc, is to lead a paper. And so in some fields of physics, the way things are done is, I think, terrible. The way things are done is the student does all the calculations, and then they turn in their like Mathematica notebook or their Python notebook or whatever to their advisor. And the advisor says, okay. And then the advisor writes the entire paper start to finish. And then the student leaves grad school and they've never written a paper. And so you can get more papers that way. If your advisor is a fast writer, all you got to do is the code, and the advisor writes it up quick, or AI writes it up quick, which is even worse. Then you never learn how to do that. And so that's something that can be talked about in reference letters. And part of the reason it's important is you're not going to be able to lead papers as a postdoc if you have not. It's hard to do that if you've not already done it. So you need to learn those skills of driving your research forward yourself. You're never working completely alone. Your advisor is there for, moral support and technical support, and a lot at the beginning and less towards the end. But you need to be the driver.
Yeah.
And you might have a driving coach, but you need to be driving. And then each one of those will be incredibly hard, and then each one gets a lot easier. And then that's a skill that can prepare people to be postdocs.
And in terms of like the workload, do you think what is your metric of like work or research progress? So I think one of the examples that gets said, are usually said, is like the number of working hours. Like a student is like an indicator of their, progress or something. Is this a metric for you as well, or what is your metric for your research?
No. Two concepts. One is my students are not working for me. My students are working for themselves and driving their own research programs with my active help. It's very active, and when we're talking about the research topics on, a very frequent basis. Sometimes we talk every day, sometimes it's every week or two. We don't have a regular structure. It depends on the difficulty density of the project. At some points, the students are like, I know what to do, I just need time to do it. So then we just check in less often. Other times, they are more stuck, and then we might talk even every day. So I try to match my availability to, like I said, the difficulty density of where the project is.
So how does work-life balance look for you?
We'll get to that. So that's one concept, is the students are not working for me, they're working for their own careers. Mm-hmm. And that comes back to the point I made at the beginning. I think people do their best work when they're working for themselves, and when the outcome of the work is the person who is doing the work benefits from the work. I like to align those two things. And not only that, I like to align the person who is doing the work benefits from the work and makes the decisions about the work. Obviously, I give a lot of advice and help, but I don't want a student to be in a situation where either they're being told what to do and they can't make any decisions for themselves about the thing they're working on. That's not fun. Or they don't really benefit from doing the work. That's not fun. I want it to be fun. That's one really big concept. Another big concept is I never ever talk to anybody about working hours or when they should be doing what. So
this goes into trying to build
independence. Yes.
Independent research as the goal of a physics PhD.
Yeah. So, I don't monitor when people are here. When they want to see me, they find me. I come to see them a lot often too, but not to check up, but just to see how things are going, and not to supervise them, but to how can I help?
Yeah.
or to talk about things I'm excited about. But I never ever say what hours people should be working. And that's the decision they have to make for themselves. Now, for myself, I work a lot of hours. Nobody's telling me to do that. I'm not telling anybody else to do that. I am excited about what I'm doing and I want to do it more.
Okay.
And
you are able to find the balance between like
yeah.
work and life time.
Yeah, and and when I want to take a break, I take a break. Sometimes it's short. I try to take like little short breaks every day, and then longer breaks here and there. And I don't have a set plan. I just kind of go by my mood.
Just what works for you.
And it depends on where I am in various projects and things like that. And it's not about how much you work. It's about what you produce, how successful you are, and how interested other people are going to be in that work. So, physics is a very difficult subject. And the whole thing gets harder because you're competing with some of the smartest, most motivated people from all over the world. And so one thing I always encourage people to do when they think about jobs is I always try to think about what job do you want longest term? And then basically what do you need to do to get to be in this step to jump to that step? And then what do you need to do in this step to jump to that step? And so on, all the way back to now. Basically, what is the outcome that you want? And how are we going to build a path that makes that outcome more likely? You can never promise, but makes it more likely. And, you have to make your work stand out. Yeah. And people try to do that in different ways. I don't think people should be working in physics like just to be working. It's like, oh yeah, man, ooh, I work so many hours. Nobody cares. What they care is what you learned, what you produced, things like that. And if you can do that in less time, then great. But, it is a hard subject. You are competing with some really sharp people, and it's important to figure that out.